But now, quote, he's taken it way too far and at the cost of middle Americans, adding, we just can't afford this. Republicans up for re-election in the fall are trying to distance themselves from President Trump's unpopular policies. And according to new reporting from MS Now, the president's own political operation is, at least for now, giving them the green light to do so. We might be seeing an example of that today in battleground Michigan, where President Trump, making, frankly, a rare domestic campaign appearance these days, is campaigning alongside incumbent Republican Congressman Tom Barrett, who voted twice this summer to limit Trump's war powers and to end military intervention in Iran. Joining us now, frankly, it's an all-star team. Beginning of host of Runaway Country and MS Now senior political analyst Alex Wagner, managing editor of The Bulwark and MS Now contributor Sam Stein, former advisor to George W. Bush and John McCain, Mark McKinnon, and MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard. I should clarify, when I say it's an all-star team, it's like Major League Baseball. Every team has to be represented. Sam Stein, the token Colorado Rocky, here today. Let's start with you, Vaughn Hilliard, though. You're on the White House North Lawn, and it's your reporting in MS Now that has made so many headlines this morning and now this afternoon. Talk to us more about this, what I find sort of a surprising, at least, tacit green light from the White House to say, look, we get it. This is a tough political moment for the GOP. If there are certain issues where you need to create some space between yourself and the White House, we understand.
Jonathan, I'll admit, I was surprised, too. And Jake Traylor and I had numerous conversations with GOP operatives working with the Trump operation and the national GOP operation to help Senate and House candidates try to hold on to seats, win seats. And what we continually heard from our sources was this tacit acknowledgement and head nod to candidates that maybe don't come out and say the Iran war is awful, bring it to an end, but try to not talk about it the best you can, because it's not a winning subject matter. When it comes to the economy, you don't need to touch what Donald Trump is doing when it comes to tariffs or call it the golden age. Acknowledge the fact that people are struggling, that gas prices are high, but then go and focus on other provisions of the One Big Beautiful Bill, like tax cuts and increase to child care tax credits. And yet, what does that do? That runs completely counter to Donald Trump's own message. And the sources and the operatives that we talked to that are trying to help Donald Trump and the Republicans here hold on to majorities said that they acknowledge that Donald Trump is going to say whatever he says on a given basis, like we expect any minute now in Michigan, but it very well may be running counter to the midterm strategy that they're urging their down ballot candidates to utter on the campaign trail themselves.
So, Mark, you know a thing or two about campaigns. Is this sort of an unusual permission structure set up by the White House? I mean, it's just, look, he's a lame duck.
It's a desperate one.
Yeah, he's a lame duck with poor poll numbers. So tell us more about this. And again, one has to wonder how long it lasts. Is Trump really going to be okay with some Republicans saying no thanks?
But the problem is he's still the top of the ticket, and people still look to the top of the ticket as kind of being the guidepost for this. And if you're a Republican candidate, if you're running right now, all you're doing is explaining. All you're doing is being on defense. You got nothing proactive to run. I mean, you're talking about you can't talk about the economy, you can't talk about inflation, you can't talk about the war unless you want to be defensive about it. They have nothing proactively to say about any of those issues. And the thing is striking to me, Jonathan, in terms of some of the numbers you're talking about. First of all, we know the midterms are all about enthusiasm of voters. Well, what Republicans are enthusiastic about what they're seeing out there right now for a guy who ran on stopping forever wars and making sure the economy was in good shape. So it hasn't delivered on either one of them. And in 2018, when the Democrats picked up 41 seats, the Republican numbers were much better than they are right now.
So, Alex, I guess the question is then, well, what do these Republicans have to talk about? This is a Congress that really only put together one significant legislative accomplishment, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, which frankly polls very poorly, among many Americans. And then, you're dealing with rising gas prices and a war that no one wants and the president can't get out of.
Yeah, I mean, he's on his way to Michigan, where the two of the key races, you have candidates who are actively voting against him. Michigan's largest trading partner is Canada. And now the president of the United States is going to impose 50% tariffs on the state's largest trading partner because the president of the United States doesn't understand how the wind works. He's literally shooting himself and them in the foot at every turn, to say nothing of the effect of, the war on gas prices and the general question of affordability. I mean, Trump doesn't have any interest in doing anything good for these candidates, which is why in the same hand, in the same day, which is today, he's telling the Senate that they have to stay in Washington for the August recess because he wants them to pass the Save America Act. August is a key time for all these incumbent and or endangered Senate Republicans to go and campaign. I mean, he's literally using every arrow in his quiver to shoot at his own party. It's stunning. And it might suggest to you that when he said he didn't really care about the midterms, however many months ago that was, he really meant it because he's doing everything to prove just that.
Yeah, perhaps a rare moment of truthfulness from the president there. Sam Stein, let's talk about this dynamic a little further, because, Alex is right. Ordering Congress to stay put in August seems borderline political suicide. But we are seeing, and again, I don't want to overstate this. This is not like it's a GOP revolt by any means. But there has been small moments of pushback to Vaughn's reporting. Maybe there are some Republicans who are going to try to create some space between themselves and the White House on the campaign trail. And here we have to look at Senate Majority Leader Thune, who has repeatedly said no to Trump's demands about the SAVE Act, but most particularly about blowing up the filibuster.
Let me just note that to extend the all-star analogy, you have me batting cleanup here. Just noting that going forward. Okay.
You earned it,
to your
buddy.
point.
You earned it. The fans voted you in. What can I say? They voted you in. You're popular.
First ballot.
Look, Thune's in a weird spot because if he were to bring this bill to the floor, it would be defeated, and that would be bad for the party writ large, right? They would look feckless, and not only that, Trump would lash out against the lawmakers who voted against it, and you'd have a bad situation. Yeah, Trump obviously clearly wants this, why he's demanding that they stay in for August recess, although he's already coming back off that request. Sort of in the macro elements, every party in power in the midterm has to deal with this type of equation. Usually you want to sort of downplay how great things are because you don't want voters to feel like you're out of touch or leaving them behind. But Trump is incapable of doing that. He continuously talks about this being a golden age and how everyone's 401k is skyrocketing. So there's cross currents there. But the biggest curiosity to me is that he's sitting, or his committees and allied committees are sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars in cash that they've raised, and they haven't spent it. And if you were someone who was desperately worried about losing control of Washington, D.C., about having the Democrats take over, have subpoena power, and check on your presidency, you would be spending that money, right? You would be trying to invest in key races. There's 99 days left. They may, in fact, open up the bank, but it doesn't feel like they have the type of urgency that you would expect for someone in this position. And I'm not particularly sure why. Now, as for Republicans and the Owen Shires of the world and all that, I don't expect Republicans to break from Trump. I don't think anyone expects Republicans to break from Trump, even if they're allowed to deviate a little bit. But the big problem would be a lack of enthusiasm. And what you're seeing in the polls is that Republicans are, by and large, much less enthusiastic than Democrats to vote in this midterm election. And some, in the case of like Owen Shire and others, they're openly considering voting for Democrats. That is real poison for the Republican Party because they need the turnout. It's difficult for them already with Trump not on the ticket. It's easier when he is on the ticket because you get all those Trump enthusiastic voters to come out. With him not on the ticket and this general malaise around the election, that's where Democrats could really run up the numbers.
So Trump has, we should note, taken the stage in Milford, Michigan. We'll keep an eye on it, and if there's anything of note, you can see it there. If you have anything of note, we'll bring it to you. But Mark, what would, you've run these kind of campaigns. What sort of messaging would you be?
Well, first of all, you start with some other numbers, which is when you ask voters if they're better or worse off because of Trump's policies, 58% say worse off, 13% say better off. And so that 13% is, I guess, friends and relatives. But the thing about, Carville was right 40 years ago when he said it was the economy stupid. If it was then, it always is. That's the primary driver of any presidential campaign. But here's the problem. The people who were great at campaigning, retail campaigning, one of the, Hall of Famers was Bill Clinton, famously said when he had economic anxiety among voters, I feel your pain. Trump's message is you have no pain. Your pain is imagined. You can't spin that to voters. I've tried to spin a lot of stuff during my years in campaigns and was successful at some of it, but never can you tell people that they don't have economic anxiety when they have it.
So, Alex, you're on the road a lot. What are you hearing from the sort of everyday Americans in the corners of the country here, Republicans, Democrats alike, about what issues matter to them right now? And indeed, to Mark's point about this seemingly pretty significant enthusiasm gap.
Well, for our podcast, we always talk to people who are at the front, the center of the headlines. And one thing you hear about a lot is healthcare costs, which sort of have just gotten bundled, I guess, into the overall question of affordability. But the decision for Republicans to do nothing about Obamacare subsidies and to let healthcare costs skyrocket for 22, 23 million Americans was, I think, a very ill-informed decision because that coupled with gas prices, coupled with tariffs, it all promotes a picture of Trump not caring at all, as he said, about the expenses of everyday living expenses for Americans across the country. The other piece of it that I think you combine with this, and it's a sort of full weather system of bad news for Trump and the party. The Epstein files prove that Trump was perhaps corrupt or that he had something to hide. The entrance of the United States into the Iran war with Israel proved that he was a liar about foundational campaign promises. And then the tariffs, the gas prices, and the continued economic pain just go to bring home the idea that he truly does not care about the lived experience of so many in this country. We say economic pain and we talk about it in the abstract, but the notion that you cannot afford groceries and cannot afford to go to the doctors is not something that exists once a month. That's an everyday feeling of insecurity and peril and danger and despair. Like, that is piercing. And to get through that with just sort of broad, promises that things will get better if only you keep Republicans in power of the legislative branch, I think is a very losing message. They have ignored the concerns of Americans for the entire time that Trump has been president. And now the chickens are coming home to roost.